Welcome to the Rich Report, a podcast with news and information on the world of big data. Today, my guest is from ClearStory Data. We have the VP of Marketing at the company, Stephanie McReynolds. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Rich. Great to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on, Stephanie. Why don't we take a look at your slides, and we'll do a Q&A after that.
That sounds great. So a little bit about my background before we jump in. I've spent my career in the data space, and ClearStory Data was a great opportunity to take a new look at the market and some of the changes that were happening, not only in the technology of managing data, but also from the perspective of how end users really adopt data in their organizations and can use big data to make decisions. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on what inspired the solution that we're going to talk about today. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see some of the trends we've observed in the market over the last 5 to 7 years. And probably most of your listeners are familiar with these trends already, so I won't spend too much time walking through them. But the data landscape has changed dramatically over the last 5 to 7 years. When I started my career, the enterprise data warehouse was really the focus of everyone's data initiative. And what we've seen happen over the last 5 to 7 years is that the sources of data that we have coming into our organizations are much more diverse than just the enterprise data warehouse. So we're seeing just an explosion of not only volume of data coming into the organization, but also the types of data that we're starting to analyze is coming up to us in different forms. So in addition to relational data types, we're seeing a lot of semi-structured data from log files, a lot of unstructured data, and many different sources of data, not just a single source of truth anymore in our organizations. We're also seeing a trend of external data exploding, and so data APIs that are available publicly have grown tremendously over the last 5 years. I think if you look back 5 years, there were only about 50 open data APIs, and now there are we're starting to hit almost 10,000. That data, whether it's coming from external sources or internal sources, is increasingly fluid, increasingly fast-changing. It's hard to predict what type of scale you need to be able to support in our systems to sustain that growth of data that we're seeing. And so that's all issues that are happening on the technology side. As a solution vendor, as a product vendor who focuses on bringing applications to the business user, maybe the most important trend that we see is that the speed and the need for continuous insights in our business communities have changed. Organizations are really looking to make data part of their decision-making process and to do that across the board. And that need for access to data and insights is driving a real change in the business. If we go to the next slide, this need for speed and this need for continuous insight by business individuals that don't have a breadth of technical skill set often. I often joke that, as a marketer myself, I know many of my peers may not remember their Stats 101 class. So if you're a marketing manager and you're trying to make data-driven decisions on these types of volumes and numbers of sources, it's hard just to evaluate the data, let alone gain access to it. And so that type of a user, whether it's a financial manager or a marketing manager or someone in the supply chain in the business, their needs are pretty clear today if they're going to become a data-driven decision-making organization. And if you look at a lot of the organizations over the last couple of years that have become giants in their market, whether it's Amazon or Netflix or Google, these organizations have used data to redefine their business. They've focused on speed of cycle times over just scale of physical locations, and that's part of their competitive advantage. And so for business people in Fortune 1000 companies to get the same advantage, their needs are the ability to pose a question and quickly get to an answer or an insight, to be able to see that answer and insight in a very visual way so that they can have an easier time of interpreting how to apply that feedback to decisions in the process, and then continuously to refresh those insights so that they're keeping pace with the market. So this need for quick cycle times and easier data-driven decisions has forced most organizations to look at their data strategy and rethink their data strategy and look for solutions that may assist it in these areas. If we go to the next slide, the simplicity of the problem is really all I want to do as a business person is pose a question, be able to interact with a machine that might help me with a little bit of analysis and discovery. And then the majority of the work happens when I want to collaborate with my peers to ensure that we have clean data, consistent data, and we're actually getting to a point of decision making as a group. Many of the data teams we see in today's market are distributed, sometimes across geographies. And so this process of collaborating around an insight has become much more important in the last 5 to 7 years than it was when I first started my career or when data warehouses got started. And so you need technology that's going to give business people direct access to more data and more sources to speed the processing of that data, to distribute it across more people, and then at the end of the day, make it really easy to consume. And so if we go to the next slide, focused on is delivering to that need. We've introduced an application and a platform that we believe is the first data intelligence solution on the market. And what I mean by a data intelligence solution is a solution that leverages the machine, that leverages data processing to inform an end user, a human, of where to look for insights, but then allows a human to also inform the system. A data intelligence solution allows end users to very rapidly converge or bring together not only their private data, but also external data sources, some of those external data APIs. This might be census information. This might be weather information. It's information that creates context around our internal data. So if I'm looking at my own sales data and I see and I'm a retailer and I see a spike of sales of umbrellas in a certain region, I might assume that a promotion we ran for umbrellas was the cause of that spike if I didn't have another resource to compare that data to. But if I have access to a weather API, I might see that there was actually an unusual storm that blew in that time of year that helped spike those sales. And so the context of what I'm looking at changes the more data and the more sources I add into my analysis. So what data intelligence solutions do and what ClearStory Data is focused on is giving business users direct access to private and external data, making it easy for that data to come together, to be converged, to deliver an insight, and then allowing the end users to interact very rapidly with that insight and collaborate, often across a wide team, which might include not only business users, but data experts in the business, which could be data analysts or data stewards, or data architects or business intelligence analysts or data scientists. There's a lot of terms that we've used over the last several years to describe data experts in our organization, and they all have a role to play in this process. If we move to the next slide, one of the challenges we've seen over the last couple of years with most organizations is not so much the ability to pose a question and to work through the process of analysis, but if we build this slide, a lot of organizations is what we've called the last mile problem here. And that is that for a business user to gain access to data and make sense of it, they have to rely on a long string of technology professionals to assist with preparing that data for analysis. And this process can take days, it can take weeks. I've even seen organizations where it takes months to access the right data sources, often with big data, because technology of old, traditional technology, wasn't able to handle the volumes and speed of processing that we have access to now. You often had to sample data in advance, which has its own trade-offs and mistakes that can be made and can skew your analysis. And then you needed individuals to pre-model that data before finding insights and then load it into some tool, often a business intelligence tool that an end user could actually access. So that issue of having all those individuals involved and that time lag involved in preparing the data has meant traditionally that end users have not been able to effectively make decisions based off of the data because of the time that it takes to prepare that data. By the time you get the information, that market moment has already passed. And finding insights in this data can often be, if you rebuild this slide once more, can often be an iterative process. And so you don't always know in advance exactly what the question is that you're asking. You may have a question that's very close. You may have something that's, you might term a hypothesis that you want to test. And so that iterative nature of the problem requires technology to help out in speeding that time to answer and allowing you to experiment more with the data that you have access to. So how does move to the next slide? And what we to do is to have their data experts create data stories. And in our application, how you create data stories is by using an application interface that allows you to define what are the data sources you want to connect to. There's default visualizations of it, then the system, with the intelligence of the system, represents to the end users. And so the individuals that prepare the data don't need to know APIs for external sources. We provide a catalog of external data sources for context within the product itself, but in an area we call data you may like. It's kind of a data recommendation system for end users. And we allow internal data, private data to the organization, to be registered in that catalog. And that registration process happens through an application that does not require traditional ETL or coding in SQL or MapReduce. It's simply a drag and drop application to define data sources for end users. What you'll see is then the users in the business, whether those are data experts or business people like that marketing manager or financial manager or supply chain manager, those individuals can then interact very naturally with stories. They can begin to ask questions of their data. They can visualize and explore that data so they can see what's there. They can see the size, the shape, the structure of that data. They can then iterate on which sources of data they might want to merge together to get a broader view to create context, augment that analysis with calculations or correlation analysis, and then collaborate on insights. We have several features that include things like discussion threads, as well as markers and bookmarks for sharing insights and hypothesis testing across a broader team. One of the unique things about the ClearStory data application is that it is supported by a very robust platform. A number of individuals from our team, actually pretty much everyone in the engineering team, has come from a big data background, whether that's at companies like Teradata or Oracle or Astrodata, that was an innovator in the massively parallel processing database space, or companies like Facebook and Google that are more focused on big data applications for end users. Our team has brought a wealth of knowledge on how big data platforms need to support this ease of use in an application to the table. Slide, what you'll see is a depiction here of how the application and platform work together in a data intelligent way. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see some of the data sources that we connect to. The ability, when it comes to internal data, to connect not only to a database for relational or structured data, but also to Hadoop and file structures that may store semi-structured data, log files in many cases. We also see in many organizations that data comes in the form of simple flat files or Excel files. That's still the standard of use for many business people's multi-versioned Excel files where they store their data, and so we connect to that as well. And then when it comes to external data, as I mentioned, we connect to public APIs for government data or macroeconomic data often. We also connect to web sources of data, which might include social media or clickstreams. And we partner with premium data providers to distribute their data through our platform. We recently announced partnerships with folks like Kantar Media for advertising data, with Factual for location-based data, weather analytics for weather data, and several others. The power of the platform is really it really shows when we connect to that data. So when we say that the system is data intelligent, what that means is that when we connect to a source, we actually introspect the data that's in that source. We look at the semantics of what's in that data. Does it have timestamp-oriented information? Does it have information that looks like it's a physical geographic location? Does it have information that looks like it's a product hierarchy? And we use that semantic analysis of the data to profile what's in that data set, what's in that source. And that starts to inform the process of interacting with the data from an application perspective. So a copy of that data is cached in in-memory data units on the ClearStory platform. We are a cloud-based solution, so these in-memory data units are distributed as a distributed memory system in the cloud. And then that understanding of the data that we've created informs a process of bringing data sets together that we call harmonization. So end users can visually select two data sets or two data units, and the system will automatically determine how that data should be navigated, what the right levels of aggregation are, what the right hierarchy is to that data. It will present to the end user a way to navigate across both of those data sets without the end user having to do any pre-modeling of that data, or without the end user having to inform the system in advance of how that data should be navigated. And we call this a smart default. The end user can always override that smart default assumption of a model that would work for them to navigate the data. But it's a very powerful concept that reduces that time to value with that data set. An end user can just play with the data, have a very natural experience with the data rather than having to go through a strict development process in advance. That harmonization engine works in concert with a visualization engine that presents the data in an approachable way for the human and takes inputs from the human that assist in creating filtering queries underneath the covers and calculation queries underneath the covers, so the data is then represented back to the end user in a form that's easy to navigate and find insights within. And then the last engine here that we've represented on this diagram is our collaboration engine, which not only takes into account the state of the data when someone wants to make a comment or share it with others and save that state of the data with others in the organization, but also ensures that any collaboration that's happening with the system is always secured, and that individuals have permissions to see that data and to comment on those insights. And so the system works in concert with the human, smart defaulting at stages in order to reduce the amount of time that's required to prepare and present the data, but always allowing the human to then override those smart defaults where necessary. And so there's a number of proprietary algorithms that we use to make the system as smart as possible to get the human down the right path of the right data recommendation, always ensuring that the human's intuition, that the human's ability to interpret data is taken into an account and is the last word in the system. And so if we move to the next slide, this is really what we mean by data intelligence. It's the system and the human working in concert together. It's about more data, more sources for more people, and more speed throughout that entire process. We're very excited to introduce ClearStory Data to a broader market, and we think that this is really going to be transformational for the industry, this new approach to working with data. If we move to the next slide, I wish I could have shared the application with you on this screencast, but if you're interested in seeing more and finding out more about ClearStory Data, we'd love to invite you to join us for a live demonstration. And Rich, thank you very much for inviting me today to share some of our thoughts with your audience.
Well, thanks for that, Stephanie, for that overview. A question, I mean, with your background and your team coming from the data world, did you see a gap that, there was just not a human-centric approach to these problems? Is that where you started?
Yeah, I've been a hands-on user of many different infrastructure technologies as well as applications throughout my career. I spent a little bit of time at Business Objects, and I was at Astrodata and worked with a lot of the new data visualization tools like a Tableau or a ClickTech, which are amazing from a data visualization standpoint. But what I found and what the team found in working with a lot of the tools that existed in the marketplace was that those applications were great if you knew what you were doing and you had already sampled your data and you had a good sense of what you wanted to accomplish in the visualization. So those tools were challenging if you wanted to have this more exploratory hypothesis testing experience with the data, if you just wanted to experiment and kind of try to find out where there might be something interesting to poke at in the data, the process of having to model everything before you got to that point takes some of the creativity out of the process, right? And so I think from an application perspective, that was one of the big motivators for us. And then just the realization that data architecture, with the introduction of Hadoop and technologies like Spark, which we work with in our platform, the technology space had changed so much in terms of infrastructures and core technology that you could use to address these problems, that there really was an opportunity for rethinking this platform and application stack from the ground up at this particular moment in time. And so I think we're at a very unique moment in time where there's a nice opportunity to leverage the advancements we've seen in Hadoop-based technology, as well as the need for many organizations who are trying to change and transform their businesses with more data-driven decision-making.
Yeah. So, Stephanie, how disruptive is it to implement the ClearStory data? I mean, is this a layer one might place on top of what you're already doing, or how would it work?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Our intent is not to replace any of the durable stores of information you have in your organization. Companies have invested millions of dollars in their data warehousing strategy and their Hadoop strategy. We're not looking to disrupt the storage of the data in the organization. What we want to do is be able to provide more access to those durable stores of data to a variety of different users in the organization, some of which don't have a technical skill set. And so we sit on top of wherever your data is stored, and you actually have an opportunity in ClearStory to begin to combine data from Excel files or CSV files with data from a database or data from Hadoop within the ClearStory application itself. And that process is easy enough that a business user could connect those things themselves within ClearStory. And so we're meant to be a layer on top of your existing investments in how you're storing the data and keeping that up to date, and really meant to get more people using that data. So hopefully the value of that data only increases the more people that can add their business intuition and use it to find insights. The other way that we're trying to lower the barrier to adopting data in organizations is we're deployed today as a software as a service offering in the cloud, and so we're lowering the barrier of adoption for our customers by managing this environment for them as a software as a service offering.
Okay, well, with that in mind, you have a webinar, but how easy is it to kick the tires on this, Stephanie, and see if it's right for my organization?
Absolutely. We've been working with a number of Fortune 500 companies to date in kicking the tires and bringing the product into production implementations in their organizations across a wide variety of different business functions, be it supply chain teams to marketing teams to financial analysis and market research with some banks. And so, we are looking to partner with organizations of all sizes with all different types of use cases. Typically we invite people to join us to take a look at the product, see if it's something that speaks to the individual we're working with or their organization. And then to get started, we'll start with a small project typically. That can be something you have in CSV files that you just want to see how the system would respond to and connect that to some of the external data that we have. And we found that things move pretty quickly from there once folks can get access to some of their data in the system. So, if folks are interested in taking the next step, I encourage them to join one of our demonstration webinars or to just reach out to us directly and start a conversation.
Well, terrific. Well, Stephanie, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. Okay, folks, that's it for the Rich Report. Stay tuned for more news and information on the world of big data.